Welcome to the second part of this history of political philosophy, as seen from the viewpoint of a libertarian. At the end of part 1, we were examining the political implications of the Reformation, and the first recording in the second part, which deals with the political theory or theories of the Huguenots, is in some ways a continuation of that discussion, exploring some more interesting issues before we move over conclusively to the modern period. Here is the lineup of the major sections of the second part of the course. With the exception of the recording on the Huguenots immediately following, which takes just one recording, all of the other sections will take at least 2 recordings, some 3, and a very few 4. We start with a look at the Huguenot political theory. Then we move on to consider one of the foundational thinkers of modern political philosophy, Jean Bodin, the apostle of sovereignty. After him, we examine a thinker who lost out to Bodin in the convoluted intellectual disputes of the late 16th and early 17th centuries, Johannes Althusius. After Althusius comes Hugo Grotius, often considered to be the intellectual father of international law. When we leave Grotius, our interest takes a definite Anglophile turn, beginning with a look at the work of Thomas Hobbes, which no history of political philosophy can ignore, offering as it does one of the strongest challenges to any libertarian political theory. Then comes a very broad survey of the extraordinary intellectual ferment surrounding the English Civil War, before we return to earth with the quintessentially liberal John Locke. From the English, we turn to the French, or Swiss to be precise, and examine the thought of the man who, for good or for ill, has exercised an extraordinary influence over modern thought, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. After our continental excursion, back we go to Britain, where we look at the naturalistic political philosophy of the Scotsman David Hume. And the Irishman who is regarded as the first theorist of conservatism, Edmund Burke. After the heights of Burke's flamboyant conservative rhetoric and a thematic section on conservatism and libertarianism, we sober up with a look at the work of the very unflamboyant John Stuart Mill. After Mill, Marx. Like Marx or loathe him, you cannot ignore him, and we don't. After Marx, the anarchists take the stage. First, 2 men I describe as anarchist prophets, William Godwin and Max Stirner, followed by the classical and slightly exotic anarchist trio of Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, Michael Bakunin and Peter Kropotkin, before finishing with a look at our English-speaking anarchists, Josiah Warren, Lysander Spooner, Benjamin Tucker, and Oberon Herbert. Next comes the survey section on what I am calling 20th century tribalism, the 3 ugly sisters of fascism, National Socialism and Bolshevism. This is followed by another survey section on the depressing topic of war and the state. And the course concludes with a brief look at some seminal 20th century thinkers: Ayn Rand, Friedrich Hayek, Robert Nozick, Murray Rothbard, and John Rawls. The sections are relatively independent of each other, so you should feel free to go immediately to whichever one takes your intellectual fancy, without feeling some intellectual obligation to work your way penitentially through the others. The sections on the English Revolution, 20th century tribalism, war and the state are thematic rather than being linked to a specific thinker or set of thinkers. The remaining sections focus primarily on the thought of one particular writer or another. If your interests are primarily in contemporary matters, you should start with the later recordings according to taste and work backwards as your inclination takes you. However you make use of this material, I hope you find the course enjoyable and informative. If you have any questions or comments, use the forum to air them, and to make sure I don't miss what you have to say, copy any questions or comments to me on email at gerard.casey@ucd.ie. So, let's turn your attention now to the political theories of the Huguenots.